John, it's good to have you back here, brother.
Thanks, dude. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, man. Last time we had you on, we were talking about own your past, change your future. That was a while ago, though. That was a little bit
like
ago.
100 years ago. Yeah, it's really a trip.
It was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly.
2 weeks ago. We were just saying 2 weeks. So, but yeah, and then you and I, we broke bread with my 10-year-old son at Ramsey Solutions back in the end of January, which was super fun. Thanks for having us out, by the way.
Of course, man. I'm glad y'all came out.
It was fun. So my 10-year-old Lawson, who was with us, because I got your book, and I actually had your book, Building a Non-Anxious Life, and then your team sent me another one, and Lawson saw that. He's like, "Isn't that guy that I had a hamburger with?" I was like, "That's the guy. That's the guy."
Yeah. Very cool, man. That's awesome.
Well, brother, let's do this. For the audience who did not get a chance to maybe listen to your first show, I would love for you to just share what does your family currently look like now? Marriage, kids, whole 9 yards.
I think we are down to 7 chickens from 15. We've got a bobcat loose somewhere, and so I'm trying to figure that out. Out in our place, and 3 dogs now. 3 dogs. Good grief.
Get those dogs on that bobcat, man.
For real, man. Except they'll get on the chickens too. 2 amazing kids, 8 and 14, and then my wife and I will be doing 22 years in July. She's amazing.
Congrats, man. You guys are 1 year ahead of Jessica and I, so we'll be 21 years in August this year.
Your marriage is old enough to drink now, so congratulations.
It is. Okay, so we'll start out with 1 or 2 fun questions, just kind of get warmed up here. Not that you need it or I need it. We've been doing this now for a long time, but I am dying to know. I think I didn't ask this, but I wanted to. Your left arm, what is the ink on there, man? Because I see it all the time in your videos, and whoever did that work really did a good job.
So the short of it is I travel all over the place, and I'm a nerd, and I usually take a bag full of books, and I sit in the hotel and read until I speak or do whatever, and then I get on a plane and come home. And I thought, I'm going to get fired from this. This doesn't last forever. And I'm going to be so sad that I went to all these rad cities and didn't do anything. So then I thought, okay, I don't want to just go hang out in bars or something like that. And so then I thought, you know what, I'm going to get a tattoo in every city. And so every place I would go, I would just book a tattoo. And so it started just all over the place, and they just all ended up. And then I've learned that tattoos are as good or not good as like haircuts. And so I have multiple tattoos that have been covered up by so it's just turned into a big old mess. But I finally got a great tattoo artist here in Nashville, and she's helping me make sense of the chaos. But there's just all kinds, and they're from all over the country. So it's been a fun little story there.
All right, so pick one of those tattoos, which, by the way, I do like the work, and tell me why it's meaningful.
This cardinal here was done in the middle of the night on Bourbon Street in New Orleans.
Oh, wow. That's always a fun story.
That was a while, but he did a great job. I asked for it to be about an inch, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna do 5 inches. We're gonna do a huge thing. Okay, we're doing this now." And I didn't have a lot of choice once I sat down in that. But my grandmother used to collect porcelain birds, and as a little kid, I wasn't allowed to touch them because I would break everything. And right before she died, she handed me this cardinal and this blue jay that were porcelain. They're ones that were eye level with me that I always wanted to grab. And so I brought one in and told the guy I want this, and this is what he came up with. And it's a cool reminder of my grandmother. I had no idea that red cardinals were also supposedly visits from the other side, right? And so now whenever I see cardinals, people have come up and told me that, and I didn't know that, which makes it even cooler. And so I can quickly whisper a quiet prayer to my grandparents, say, "Hey, we're doing great," and it's pretty neat. But that's that one.
That's an incredible story, man, and something that's obviously meaningful for you when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that either until my wife just informed me of that not too terribly long ago. Because every time we see a cardinal, she's like, "Oh, it's my grandpa."
That's cool,
because for her, like, she knew that story too. That cardinals represent somebody's spirit or soul from the other side who's visiting. So, which I think is cool.
I love that idea. Yeah, just a good reminder.
Very cool. Well, listen, we're going to talk about your book today, Building a Non-Anxious Life. I don't know if you know this or not. I actually I've done just shy of 1,200 episodes on this podcast over the past almost decade now of doing this. And I've never done one thing that I did when it actually, as it pertains to your book. So I read your book cover to cover, couldn't put it down. I read
Thanks,
it
man.
and I listened to it. And it was, I got to tell you, man, I've always looked up to you for as long as I've watched you and known you. And then obviously we broke bread and that kind of thing, but you were so incredibly real and authentic in that book. And the episode that I'm talking about, that just goes back a few weeks ago, I did this entire episode on connection. And the thing that I've never done on any podcast is read from someone else's book. And I read
thank you.
a huge portion of that chapter to my audience. And of course, shared it was your book and how much it meant to me. But I was just like, you guys got to hear this chapter. And it was that chapter on connection. And the story that I just couldn't get out of my mind was visualizing you in the car with your team. You were out of town. Your book, Own Your Past, Change Your Future, just hit #1. And then you were in your hotel, like later that night. And I'm just sitting there picturing you of these things that you were talking about in that book going through your mind. Because I think we see people on social media. You have almost 1 million followers. So the last thing that people think in the world is like, John doesn't live 1 minute alone, like at all. And he doesn't live 1 minute without being connected. But for you, I would love for you to share that story from your book with the audience, because that just rocked me, man. It was such a good story. Yeah.
Well, so I think the preface I'd probably like to put out there is, I don't know many people, and I say this both humbly and not humbly, like really over the top braggy. I have some of the greatest friends on planet Earth, and I've got 3 or 4 friends that I've been friends with over 40 years, which is unheard of these days. And then I've got several other friends that I've been friends with for over 30-something years. And then I moved away, and we kept these long text threads going, and we kept these hilarious, random once-a-month phone calls, and, hey, I need a quick question on this, or one guy's an HVAC guy, and one guy's a finance guy, and I'm a mental health guy. And so we'd call each other for, various thises and that's, but slowly but surely, life just got busy. And we're not hanging out every Monday night like we used to. And we used to sit on there's 3 of us. There's me and Todd and another guy named John. And I was Hyper John, he was Fat John. And we'd hang on at the back of Fat John's porch, and we would, and he's a CFO. He's doing just fine. And we would have a drink, and we would talk politics, and we were all over the mat. And so anyway, long story short, that just ended. And then 1 month becomes 2 months, becomes 6 months, becomes 9 months. And this was the first major book I've ever written. And so I felt exposed, and I'm a former academic, so it all had to be cited perfectly. And I used to fail students for plagiarism. So I just want to make sure it was perfect. And I was still shooting my regular show during the day, plus Dave's Ramsey Show, plus Troutman. So anyway, it just got crazy. And then fast forward, I'm in the back of a rented SUV, like a rock star that they rented for me. We're driving down the road on the way to a book signing in Dallas, and the head of publishing gets a phone call, and he just turns. He's a very stoic guy. He's hilarious. And he turns and hands the phone to me, and it's Dave Ramsey screaming into the phone, "You did it! #1!" And I'm not going to lie, this is one of the top 5 coolest moments. It's just surreal, right? #1, I'm so proud of you. You did it. Amazing. I called my mom. Amazing. Called my wife. Incredible. Went to this book signing, and not because of me, but because Dave announced this on his show. There's a line out the door and around. So we do all this stuff, man. And it is just like, the social media team had figured out a way to record these lines to make them look like there was 1,000 people there, and to get them all cheering. So it's just loud, and it's bananas, and we're signing books, and everyone's being kind. And then we get in the car, we go grab something to eat, and then we go back to the hotel. And I remember going back in the hotel, and the door shuts. And that's just it, right? And I thought, like, I could call Todd, and I was like, didn't I talk to that dude 9 months or 7 months or 6 months? Like, I didn't call that guy forever. And what sucks for me now in retrospect is I absolutely 100% could have called him, and he would have cheered just as loud as Dave did. He would have screamed and yelled into the phone. And I could have called Fat John, and he would have made some joke, and he would have cheered into the, like, I could have. I had created this awkward barrier between us. And it's crystallized in my mind. I remember I just went to bed. And I remember I couldn't think of a sadder thing to do on that day, right? Like it was supposed to be, this is when the confetti falls from the sky. And I don't think I put this in there. I don't know where this came from, man, but I had this imaginary, I just thought $1 million just goes into your checking account, right? I don't know what I was thinking would happen next, but I thought everything's different now. And then you get up the next morning and you're kind of tired and kind of this, and you got to go catch a flight and you're standing in the Southwest line or whatever. And it's like, oh, nothing changed. And then you'd have this great moment and you're all by yourself. And your mom hugs you and your wife is proud of you. And then she's like, hey, on the way home, can you grab some milk from the... You're like, yeah, sure. Right? And the world just keeps going. And I don't know that I've felt that alone. I mean, that's one of the top 3 or 4 loneliest moments of my life, when it was supposed to be a moment that I had pictured surrounded by everybody I love, and realizing, oh, if you don't cultivate being around everybody you love, when cool things happen or when bad things happen, there's nobody around.
I'll tell you, man, that story really hit me personally, just because, everything I do with working with men over the past 9 years, this is a trait. And if you don't mind, I mean, I know we're going to talk more about your book, but I really want to
forget the book. Let's talk about this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, man, this connection piece, right? That, like, so for instance, you go to your social media, right? You have 1 million followers. People just automatically assume that we as human beings, we look at followers or we look at whatever else. Oh, that person's well connected. They have so many people in their life, right? But that is, you look behind the curtain, and our traits, I think, especially as men, human beings, I know your book is written for men and women, but men in particular, we do this thing. And to be honest, I got to be honest, John, I don't know why we do it. And I know you teach to this. I teach to this. I still do it. Like, your story is so similar to mine. And I'm like, but I don't know why. Why do we do that?
I have actually spent a lot of time on that question because it was haunting me. And I actually was in Dallas last week, come to full circle, if you will, and gave a speech to 2,700 business owners. And it was the hardest speech I've ever given in my life. I've never been that nervous. I just don't get nervous as a rule. Life's too short. And I was pretty puckered up on that one. And the best I can tell, if you throw all the science in, all the nerd stuff, and all the yada yada, I don't think we have a psychology in our current culture for the word enough. I don't think we know when to stop. And 150 years ago, you had to stop because you'd gotten all your crops in. You had to stop because you were waiting on that cow to finish growing the cow inside of it so you could birth it and then start your work. You had enough because your home was built and you had firewood for the winter. And I don't think we have a psychology for enough. And somehow the myth of the self-made man, which is a complete and utter nonsensical lie, that myth has become weirdly intertwined with a lack of psychology for the word enough. And so if you never think you have enough, if there's always one more deal to get and one more book to write and one more podcast to publish and one more sales call to make, if you don't do that, then the way we've written the algorithm is, then you're not enough. And I think most of us, especially I'm talking to men here, we don't know how to be vulnerable with our wives. That's not in the script we grew up with. And that's the world that we now live in. We do not know how to be present with our kids without yelling and screaming. And we don't know how to live emotionally regulated lives. And so when our 7-year-olds, I was in a restaurant the other night in my little rural town outside of Nashville. And I saw a dad pick his daughter up. She maybe was 4. Was screaming at her in the restaurant as he carried her out about respect. And she's 4, man. They were yelling when they came in and they were yelling on the way out. And I looked at the family I was with and I said, here's my phone. My wife is under wife. I'm going to go to jail and I need you to call her. And I got up to walk out of the restaurant. Like I was going to follow that dude out of the restaurant. I mean, that's how out of my mind I was. And we don't know how to regulate ourselves around our kids. And so the best of us have come to believe this one terrifying sentence: the greatest gift I can give my family is to not be around. The greatest gift I can give my family is to go work really hard and make a bunch of money and be successful. That's how I'll contribute here. Because I don't know how to change diapers. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. No one will teach me. My buddies don't know how to do it. My dad sure didn't do it. My granddad sure, was fighting World War II. He didn't know how to do it. So the world has changed and we don't have the skill set for it, but I know how to go make money and I'll love my family that way. And then I end up 2,000 miles away from my wife, even though we're sitting on the couch right next to each other. And I think it all comes back to we don't believe we're enough. We don't believe that we're worth learning new skills in our house. We believe the answer to the question, what are you worth, is answered with a number, right? And so I think until we believe we're worth learning something new, until we believe that we can push through the lie that says more and more and more and more, we'll trip over happiness. And here's the deal. I wrote another #1 best-selling book the next year, right? I've done it twice. I was the son of a cop and a minister, and my wife was the daughter of 2 school teachers. We grew up with nothing, and now we have everything. And the same story repeats itself. It's a story as old as time, right? You can't chase it down. And so my spiritual practice over the last 9-10 months has been, what is enough in my household? And let's put that on the calendar. Let's put that, or the period at the end of that sentence. And once we get there, it doesn't mean it's enough forever, right? It doesn't mean we stop and you quit, but it's a built-in pause that my wife and I can look around at each other and say, okay, we just went through a wild season, a crazy season at work, a crazy season with school, a crazy whatever. What's our next move together? And we're going to build that. And then we're going to go and hit the gas, and then we're going to pause, and then we're going to reflect, and then hit the gas again. And so I think there's the two paths we've been given, and it's still a derivative from 2 books ago. It's either go 1,000 miles an hour and never stop until somebody buries you, or just quit the whole game. And I think both of those paths are just nonsense. I just think we have to be more diligent and honest about our path moving forward, and then go do the next cool thing.
I love that, man. I would love to explore. You're hitting me in the heart right now, big time, because I think that this is just such an epidemic, and I think social media and the fact that we can see everybody's lives, like, it just compounds this feeling. And
here's all social media is a computer's interpretation of what it thinks you might want to see. That's it. It has nothing to do with connectivity or relationships at all. It is a whole bunch of people transmitting data to one another. In no shape, form, or fashion is it a proxy for a relationship. It's just not. And I wanted it to be, and I've tried to make it so, and I've had some great dialogue with people. The greatest gift it's given me is I've connected with some people I never would have connected with, but it allowed us, like you and I, it allowed us an avenue to meet so we could meet in person and have a lunch together, right? And so in that way, it's like a map. It can point us to a direction where we can connect. But in and of itself is simply a computer saying, I think you might want to see this. And it's just taking a guess, right? And it's getting better and better at its guesses, but it's just not real. It's not real.
So many of us think that it is. And it sounds like what you've been working on over the past 9 or 10 months, especially within your family, within your wife, is, that feeling of enough. That is one thing, man, I have never had the answer to.
Yeah.
And I know that is one of, a human being's deepest fears, is that I will not be enough. I won't be loved, and I will be left alone or cast aside. And how do we, raising your kids and helping people that you do? I know you take so many different calls and situations, straight from your book, right? Like, the opening chapter is all about, people call in and they talk about, their alcohol or their drug use or their troubles with their marriages or whatever. And you've asked the question, like, why are you calling me? Mm-hmm. And the answer was, I got no one else to call.
Yeah. I got nobody.
And that's the world that we live in. And I guess for people who are battling with, am I enough? What is the best way to know that we're enough?
I don't believe you can answer that question. Let me back up. So you've probably heard about in the field of psychology, they have a study reproduction crisis where people have started to go back, some of these famous psychological studies that have really undergirded our society today, right? Policy decisions, educational decisions, all these different things. And they can't reproduce the study, casting significant doubt on whether the study was even valid in the first place, whether the person made up the data or they just happened to be like whatever. They can't reproduce these studies. And I am of the opinion that, yes, there's some malfeasance. Yes, there's some people who are cheating the system and just trying to get publications, yada, yada. But I think at the end of the day, any psychological study that is studying a human being in isolation by itself is in and of itself flawed or biased, because we are only who we are in relationship with other people. End of story, period. And so it's like studying protein in a lab. That's cool, but it doesn't tell you how protein is going to work in the body of a person who is doing X, Y, and Z, right? You got to study it in its context, in its relationship. And so I think people are the same way. And so when you ask me, how are we going to know we're enough? You cannot read books. You cannot listen to podcasts by yourself. You cannot do these things in isolation. You can't have deep thoughts and journal your way to it. You have to sit with somebody else and say, do you see me? And after you know these things about me, will you still show up? Right? And I'll dare use the word love, even with other men. Do you know me, and do you still love me? I wrote about this in the book, one of the funniest things ever. My buddy Kevin, he's 10 years older than me. He's on the board at Apple and Google. He's a savant, and he quit 3 or 4 years ago, all of his tech jobs, to be the CEO of a lawn care company in West Texas. And he's like, man, I'm serving the least of these in these communities. He's an amazing man. And I'll never forget the first time we were hanging up the phone. We were talking about our families or something. He goes, all right, man. Hey, Johnny, I love you. And I just was like, nope, no, you don't. like, nope. And it caught me so off guard. And we discussed it actually. And he's like, no, you can be as weird as you want, but I love you. I'm glad that you're my friend. And now, after sitting with so many people who have lost loved ones that would literally give a limb for 3 more minutes to look at the person in front of them that just passed away and make sure they knew they were loved. I don't ever get off the phone without saying it anymore. Everybody, because it's so critical and so important. So to answer your question, you're gonna have to go be awkward, and you're gonna have to be weird. And for millions of people, you're gonna have to outsource. You have to pay a therapist for a while. You're gonna have to go find a small church group. You're gonna have to join the Dad Edge team. You're gonna have to get in some of these groups and have enough courage to look at the other men in the circle and say, my name's John and I'm struggling with X, or my name's John and I want to be a better dad, and have everybody nod and be like, yeah, me too, man.
Yeah, it's that authenticity and the imperfections and to be honest, that's how your book, man, The Building a Non-Anxious Life, it just really drew me in. You even talk very openly in the book about times in your life where you were going through tremendous anxiety, where you were seeing a therapist. You were even on medication for a couple of seasons, to help you with that. You also talk about in the book too that your body, which I thought this part was fascinating, because I started thinking about just my sleep patterns from time to time. And I think you said it 2 or 3 times in the book, but it's your body knows when it's not safe.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, that one blew me away. Cause I was like, man, could that be, one of the culprits of the anxiety that we feel or trouble, sleeping at night, or these thoughts that just keep firing away and we just don't ever feel like we can truly calm down. But I was really hoping you could explain that one to us as well.
Well, take sleep, for instance. And if you listen to Matthew Walker's stuff, which is he's the sleep guru, he's the GOAT, right? Sleep is something that doesn't make any biological sense. When you think of it, like it's something, if you're a person who believes in evolution, that evolution should have taken out of the system, because it makes no sense to have 1/3 of your life not defending yourself, not finding food, and not finding a mate. That's dumb. It doesn't make sense. It's a recipe to die. Yet it's been reinforced for all of human history as a thing that has to happen. And so instead of asking ourselves, what is my body trying to protect me from that it keeps disrupting one of the most important things it can possibly do in a given day, to wake me up at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m. every single morning. Instead of doing that, we knock ourselves out. We make ourselves not asleep but unconscious with some sort of sleep hypnotic. How many friends of ours do you know that take 2 or 3 Tylenol PM every single night of their life?
Yeah.
Or take NyQuil every night, or Ambien, or Lunesta, or any of these other, Trazodone every single night of their life. Trazodone's a little bit different, but all I'd say is, like, I've got to have some sort of mechanism to do this basic core biological function. And that's probably the primer of the whole book is, what if our bodies aren't broken at all? What if we have dropped them in the middle of a world that they were not designed to live in? What does that mean for us? That's a way harder question to answer, I think, than just take 2 of these in the morning and in the evening and you'll be fine. So I've stopped going to war with my body. And that's one of the cultural malus that I think is off the rails, is that every body is screwed up and broken and dysfunctioning and malfunctioning, and we got a pill for that. We have a system for that. We have a 7-point plan for that. And I just think it's nonsense. I think our bodies are working pretty dang good. What does it mean if every single kid is struggling with attention challenges? And could it be that we're shoving the human animal into a chair for 8 hours a day and judging them for how they can sit in front of a Chromebook? Could that be the problem? Or and that all of their human existence is dwindled down to a single test score that's going to decide the fate of where they end up? Or maybe it's something bigger than that, right? And so I think when it comes to like something as simple as sleep, when I wake up at 3 a.m., nowadays, honest to God, like last night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I have a little puppy that I got my daughter. That was probably the dumbest purchase I've ever made, man.
I'm with you on that
but
one
it was
right now,
yelping at 11 and 12, and I woke up. I went and, and I was up all night. And when I popped open awake at 3 a.m. with this knucklehead little puppy next to me, I just started laughing. Because what else am I going to do, right? I could be mad and throw a temper tantrum and hit this dog. It's just one of those nights, man. I'm going to let it ride, and I'm going to make sure I exercise. I'm going to make sure I'm going to do my stuff, and then I'll give it another shot tomorrow night. And then if it happens 2 or 3 or 4 nights in a row, I'm going to begin to ask myself, okay, what is my body identifying out in my ecosystem, in my relationship, in my marriage, in my kids, my finances? What is my body trying to get my attention and let me know it's not safe to be sleeping right now because there's an emergency that it keeps detecting? And I'm going to go down that road, man. And it seems so far to be a much healthier way to handle my body trying to get my attention.
Yeah, I can't remember. I read the statistics, and I don't even know if the statistics are real, but how many people just simply can't get a good night's sleep anymore. The medication that people take is off the charts, but it was just something that really hit me hard in that book, because I went through a horrible sleep episode about 8 years ago, and my body, long story short, I completely fried my adrenal system. Most likely that was the culprit. I was training for an ultra event and just was working out like an idiot, and I think I just completely rattled my central nervous system to where it just, quite frankly, couldn't calm down. But that statement in that book really hit me hard. And I thought it was fascinating that, we try to outthink these things or maneuver them mentally, but our body will give us clues of like, hey man, not feeling all that safe lately. Something's going on. There's something on the radar here, trying to ping you here, right?
And eventually, because it loves you, it will just shut the system down.
Yeah.
It'll collapse it. And it, as a way to preserve itself, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you have a teenage driver, eventually you might just yank the wheel so that car pulls off into a field somewhere, but it gets off the highway, right? Your body will do that for you. It's just trying to take care of you.
Yeah, it's responsive like that. I just want to cover two other topics in the book that I thought were really meaningful. The financial piece, so the financial freedom and this society that we live in, right, where everything gets put on a credit card. Let's just go more and more into debt. Let's buy a bigger house when we need, the cars that we don't need, all this other stuff that we, quite frankly, could do without. Yet in the moment, we do it for that short-term happiness. But the long-term, like, it's just one of those things. It's one of those levers that's just, I don't ever really feel like I can relax. I don't feel like I can calm down because I'm always chasing. I can't remember exactly how you put it in the book, but when you're working and you have debt, you're trying to outrun or outwork the debt that you have. And you just don't ever feel like you can actually fully relax.
Well, I'll say it in a different way. And I don't think I wrote this in the book, and I wish I had. If your body knows, especially nowadays, that if it says the wrong thing at work, you're going to get fired. One wrong sentence, you're out. You're just done. You and I, we say the wrong thing in the wrong way. The joke doesn't land. One of us slips. We're over, right? We're done. And you put that on top of being a part of the loneliest generation in human history. You put that on top of a multi-six-figure mortgage for our home. You put that on 2 or 3 car payments. You put that on putting groceries on a credit card some months, right? Your body would be failing you. If you were the only person in your tribe and you were responsible for food, for shelter, for safety, your body would be failing you if it let you sleep all night. It is trying to not die. Your body would be failing you if it let you stop in the middle of an emergency and have a deep, connected, sexually intimate moment with your spouse. It would be failing you. It's not time to enjoy life and enjoy each other. It's time to not die. And that is the world we've set up for ourselves every single day. Our body knows, like in our heads, we can 6 months or 6 years, no financing, blah, 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 or no interest loan or what. We can come up with whatever schemes we want. Our body knows if you get fired, if you say the wrong joke to the wrong person and they take it the wrong way and report it to the wrong HR person, you're done. They'll take your home, they'll take your cars, they'll take your kids' schools, they'll take your food. That's a recipe for not sleeping. On the other side of it, and this sounds crazy, my wife and I worked for 15 years. This isn't like some rags to riches, like 15 years it took us. If you don't owe anybody anything and your boss suddenly becomes a tyrant, you can just smile and be like, yeah, I'm out. I'm not doing that. Or you can say, hey, I'm not going to make that meeting. I'm going to go be with my son at his graduation event. And your boss says, if you don't do that, be like, oh, just shoot me an email, right? Now your boss suddenly is the one carrying that. You're going to lose a star employee over your bad attitude, right? But it just changes the whole thing. And suddenly when your body's not at war, when it knows, yeah, if you lose that job, that's going to be annoying. It'll stink for a while, but they're not taking your house. And you have an emergency fund you've saved up. You got 6 months of expenses in your own checking account. Like, you're going to have food. You're going to have insurance. Like, then your body goes, check, cool. And you go to sleep, right? And that goes back to that sentiment, like we've created a world that our bodies can't exist in. Our bodies are not designed to be outsourced and controlled by all these different people, all these different faceless, nameless banks and credit bureaus and services, etc. And then if you go one layer deeper, they don't mean anything, right? Like if you gave me $5 million in cash right now and I went and deposited it in my bank account, I'm just trying to put that out into the universe just for whatever it is, right? But if you gave me $5 million, my credit score would not change a single point because a credit score has nothing to do with how much wealth you have. It has to do with your relationship, how you manage debt. And so, you mean you're telling me that like all these systems we're playing in and swimming in have nothing to actually do with safety, with physiological or psychological safety, with actually how much wealth we're building, how much how I am building a legacy for my kid? No, none of it. It's just a game. And so, again, I don't know another way to do it than to opt out of the system, just to completely unhook from the system and say, okay, I'm going to work really hard and drive crappy cars, and I am going to opt out, right? I'm going to opt out of the system. And then suddenly you're going to find yourself sleeping at night and being able to give recklessly to causes that you believe in, to help people out, to help friends out, whatever. It becomes an amazing way to do life.
I love that. And I think that just so many of us will chase the next shiny thing because we want to escape that. To be honest, exactly what we're talking about today, which is escaping the anxiety or escaping the things that are heavy on us. Last question I have for you is, you mentioned the word legacy, right? You've helped a ton of people, and I've gotten a small, brief opportunity to get to know you personally. And what I can tell you is that, the audio matches the video. I truly believe you're an amazing human being. But the question that was burning on my mind before we jumped on today is, let's fast forward 25, 30 years from now. And you've left a quote unquote, I'll use this term very loosely, legacy, right? Family, and for people who got to know you and also followed the advice that you gave. What are you leaving behind for family, and what are you leaving behind for people?
For my family, I want there to never be a doubt that come what may, I can go home. And I will trade all of the quote-unquote life lessons. I'll trade all of the, big moment things with my son and my daughter for when they think of their dad, their shoulders drop and they smile. They don't tense up. For when something goes sideways, their first instinct is dad will know what to do. Not, I can't call dad. And so that for me is that means I've got to really work hard to learn to be emotionally regulated. And I'm a maniac, dude. And so that's been a tough adventure for me. I have to remember that my kids are watching me 24/7. So my son watches how I treat the waitress and how I tip and how I clean up my mess at a restaurant. My daughter, similar, right? She'll get to know her value and her worth by how I treat her and the people around her. When it comes to people who listen to the shows and things like that, actually we were having this conversation the other day. I had a couple of clips right in a row, a couple of calls right in a row that were pretty sensational, right? Like, found out my dad was actually not my dad. I got 23andMe or something like that for Christmas. I ran it, and it ended up my dad was the priest in our local community when I was a kid. Like, these sensational calls, right? And so there was actually a discussion here at the office, like, is that who, do we want to chase those down? Because it's easy to become Jerry Springer in this world. And I remember I was kind of hit with a sense of peace that I normally don't have about this job. This because we've talked about it, but most people don't know this job freaks me out. I'm an introvert. I like reading my nerd books, and I miss my grad students, right? Like I would love to sit in a room and hang out with students and figure out hard problems. The public nature of this is hard, but my answer was simply this. Jerry made fun of him. Dr. Phil taught him and lectured him. When it's all said and done, I want it said that John Deloney loved him. And whatever's going on in people's lives, I want them to know that guy pulled up a chair, no matter who you happen to be, and paid for the nachos himself and said, let's figure this out. And because I think at the end of the day, that's been my heart all along, whether I worked at Burger King, whether I was a dean of students, and whether now I've got on a podcast or whatever. I want it said that, no, that dude, he showed up and just sat with us. And beyond some of my favorite things about social media, I'll say this is, if I scroll the account, it is every demographic, every political group thinks we're all on the same team, and we are. And I love that. And so for me, that's what I wanted to be said, was that dude loved people. And then provide a picture of here's what this looks like in real life. Sometimes it means saying, pull up a seat, dude, you can't cheat on your wife. or pull up a seat. Your friend's hurting kids, and you got to report that. Sometimes it's pull up a seat. You're a single mom, and I see you, and you're doing a good job. Could things be different? Yes. Is it gonna be hard on your kid? Yes. And you're doing a good job, right? So it's love looks different in different contexts, but that's my hope. That's the legacy I hope to leave. Like, I got a picture of how to love looks like.
I got to tell you, man, I think that's what I felt, and I didn't even know it until you just said what you said. But there was, and I mentioned this in the podcast I dedicated that chapter to, is that, the top 5 books that really moved the needle in my life, and yours was definitely at the top of the list. But the reader feels that. I felt it from you in that. And I think one of the reasons that I felt it so much was because the book was so giving in all the information, but you were so giving of your real story.
Thank you.
All the imperfect stuff, all the great things too. But you really, I love how you just let people in on your life. And I'm not surprised at all. And I do have one more thing to tell you, man. John, I love you.
Hey, I love you, Larry. Thank you, man. Appreciate it, dude. No, I'm super, super grateful. And I'll have to check out that episode when I'm in a good headspace. I've been I've reached that apex at the end of the year, at the end of a long, cycle, and then it's end of the year, and then I got a kid leaving 8th grade to go to high school. I just find myself crying at every commercial now, every song that comes on the radio. I'm just turning into an old man. So I don't know that I could handle it now, but I'm going to listen to that episode here in a few weeks. Or maybe that'll be the one that pushes me over the edge. I can finally get the big cry out and I can move on. But yeah, appreciate you. I appreciate you being willing to share that. That means the world to me, man. And I'm glad I hit home.
You bet, man. If you look in your DM under the Dad Edge, I popped the episode in there for you.
Oh, sweet.
So it's in there. So it just I think I was just like, hey man, this was, your book really spoke to me, and I dedicated your chapter on the podcast. But excellent, where can where can our audience find you, connect with you if they haven't already?
My preference would be to go over and check out after, and only after you finish the latest Dad Edge podcast episode. You can come check out the Dr. John Delony Show. People call in and we just figure out what's next. Today's show, we had a woman whose husband sat down and said, hey, I'm not attracted to you anymore. You've put on a lot of weight, and she didn't know what to do next. And so, I mean, it's stuff like that. It's relationship calls. It's dad checked out, and it's a single mom trying to figure out what's next and getting hounded by her families. So it's just real people going through hard stuff, man. And then if you just have to, you can open up social media and follow me at John Deloney there. But I'd much rather see you in the podcast or on YouTube's, man.
I love it, man. We're going to have a link in the show notes for the guys. All you have to do is head on over to thedadedge.com/478 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/478.
Oh, I almost forgot, dude. Ramsey Solutions runs a May sale. So if you ever want to pick up the books, it's going to be at a significantly discounted rate this month, which means our commissions go down a little bit, but it's all good. It gets them out the door, so that's great, man. But yeah, if you're going to pick up the books, this would be a good month to do it, the month of May. So good on that.
Hey, we'll also have a link in the show notes for you guys for Ramsey Solutions as well. And you did mention one other thing though in your book over and over again. I think it was it johndeloney.com/resources, or was it Dr. John? There were several things that people could go to and they could grab some resources.
Yeah, it's one of the most common questions I get is, what should I read about ADHD or about this or about this? And so we created a resource page that just points people to, here's people I read, here's people I think are great thinkers out in the space that are way ahead of things. And here's some particular books that have continued to move me. Yeah, I need to go update that. I've run into some guys that have just blown my mind recently, so it's good.
Yeah, very good. We'll have a link for that in there as well. So, Dr. John Deloney, thank you so much for coming on today, dude. This was so awesome, and really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful for what you're putting out in the world, and thank you for your hospitality, man.
Thanks, brother.
It's awesome.